It has been said that a person doesn't take a trip, but rather, a trip takes a person. A journey is measured not in miles traveled, but by the effect those miles have had on the mind and soul of the traveler. The things we think we are searching for often remain hidden, while things we never knew existed take on a new meaning and value. Every trip, every journey is a tale of transitions. The act of moving from one place to another has meaning far beyond simple geography. The story of an expedition is a story not only of how the scenery changes, but of how minds are changed as the miles fall away and how perceptions evolve with every new perspective. Travel, if it is to matter, requires a sense of adventure and a taste for imagination. Much of what is encountered along the way is spellbindingly beautiful, exotic, and breathtaking. But not everything. Transitions can be global as well as personal. There are lessons out there to be learned that will have an effect on each of us individually and at the same time have something to say to the entire human race. It is left simply to go with our eyes open and our ears to the ground. It is our experiences that make us what we are, and more importantly, what we will become.
Although we found ourselves now on the ferry going from Bellingham, Washington up to Augustine Island, Alaska to do marine surveys, really this trip had its origins a year prior when we were doing our trip on the roadless coast of the Olympic Peninsula. We had gone out there to look for tsunami debris, specifically items from the Japanese tsunami in 2011, but what we found was that our problem that we were facing was much larger.
You have to look at the source of the problem, and in this case, it boils down to the amount of plastics we're using in our everyday life, whether it's the single-use bottles for soda or water, or the packaging that everything that so many stores, you can't get out of there and purchase anything that doesn't come in some kind of a plastic wrap. Plastics don't go away, they tend to just break into smaller and smaller pieces, and I see it becoming part of the geology of our shorelines. There's pieces of plastic embedded into the mud and trapped under the sand and broken apart to where you can go take a beach sand sample from most beaches around the world and sieve it out and sort out small pieces of plastic in that sand. So it's becoming part of the geology of our planet. And from what we know about the potential impacts of ingestion of the plastics on everything from the small plankton all the way up the food chain, it's not a good thing.
So somewhere in this process, we had gone from being, treasure hunters to citizen scientists. And this year we would be expanding our programs even more. We'd be doing bird necropsies looking for stomach content, and we'd be collecting water samples looking for microplastics. We were also excited that we'd be joined by a scientist for a portion of our trip.
Well, citizen science is, just normal, everyday people that care about, their environment or, what they're doing and want to get involved to, just help further the research. The thing about citizen science is that, even if people don't have a background in a particular scientific area or don't do research, they are some of the best observers of what's going on, because they're typically people that are living in an area, they're watching, they're seeing the changes, they're out there every day. People that do our cleanups, they usually choose a section of beach that they walk on a regular basis or they live nearby, and so they're kind of the first set of eyes. So if you don't have those people on the ground, then sometimes things go entirely missed.
It's been a long day already. We're still in Bellingham, but at least we're on board, and we're more or less loaded. It seems like it's been at least 2 days that we've been gone. We just left this morning, but it's starting to feel real.
We chose Augustine Island primarily because of its remoteness. The island itself was named on St. Augustine Day, May 26, 1778, by Captain Cook during his third voyage of discovery. Because of the frequent eruptions, there's never been an indigenous population on the island. And without salmon runs, it holds no attraction for modern-day fishermen. Anything we found on the beaches would have been deposited by ocean currents. Well, you talk about a pinch me moment. Here we are on the ferry, day one, finally headed north. After hundreds of emails, dozens of to-do lists, meetings between Ken and I, getting things ready, we're headed north. We're on the trip. So it's a bit of a surreal feeling. I'm not sure what to expect. I do know that we've got a solid plan in place, but things go wrong when you're talking about Alaska. But I do know that no matter what happens, we're gonna have an interesting story, we're gonna have a great adventure, and I'm excited.
I knew that this trip would be a lot of going to new places that I'd never been before, but I tell you, when we came into Ketchikan, it felt like coming home.
Ain't it funny how, when we look back now, we never thought...
When I first moved to Ketchikan, almost 30 years ago, I lived in a house just a couple blocks down the road. And then from there, we moved to this house right here. And I never thought I'd be here again, much less this much later. And in doing what we're doing right now, it's a blast from the past.
When your kiss is a curse and a blessing both, when the ground...
It's been 30 years since, almost 30 years since I lived here in Ketchikan, and one of the things that really struck me as I'm walking down here today from the ferry terminal down here to Creek Street is just the overwhelming number of changes that have taken place here in Ketchikan in the time that I've been gone. And I know I've changed myself too. In fact, I would never have thought I would be back here today in kind of the role of an environmentalist and somebody who's trying to spread the word about certain environmental dangers that we are coming across as part of the Ikkatsu Project. Things change, people change, and that's the one constant in life is change. And we just have to be aware of those changes and make sure they're the changes we want to have happen.
This is my third time traveling by ferry in Alaska, and I have to say I love it. It is by far my preferred way to travel. And there's a couple reasons for that. Number one, you really get a sense of the size, scale, and wilderness of Alaska when you're traveling it by a slow ferry. And the other thing is the romance of it. It doesn't take a lot of imagination to see all of the old Yukon miners coming up here trying to strike their fortune, traveling with Jack London and all the other countless that came off of ships from Seattle.
It's been 5 years since I knew your name, even though I think it rarely changed. No, it's hard to know me now in light of everything, but leave me alone, I tell ya, I've been watching from the wings. See you gone down to California. She's like a mother there, oh, she's been waiting for ya. Now you both are on fire.
The last night on the Kennecott, and day 6. I'm getting a little bit of the pre-jump off jitters when I'm thinking about everything that's going on and some of the question marks that are still out there that we won't be able to really answer until we get our boots on the ground kind of thing. And will the weather hold, for us to get out? Will we get the last little bit of fresh groceries that we want to get? Will the people that I ship the bottles for our collection project, will they be home? There's a lot of things, and I'm kind of stuck on this boat, unable to actively solve any of these issues, and so it's getting me the jitter.
Well, we're almost to Homer. We're in Kodiak, Alaska. We've got about 9 more hours to sail, and then we should be in Homer this evening. They say it's not an adventure until something goes wrong, and I don't know if this qualifies or not, but we haven't made contact with Peter yet, and we're not sure whether or not he's going to be accompanying us on the trip or not at this point. So I'm not sure if that qualifies as an emergency or an adventure or something going wrong or not, but we'll see what happens.
We've got a hard call to make here is whether or not we, what we're going to do with our scientists. It's putting us in a bit of a bind. We really, at this point, we're not in a position to fix Plan A. We're just going to have to shift into Plan B.
Take the Gentaconic Fogway down past Whiskey Boulevard, or ride a draft horse with no saddle. I'll be waiting in the yard. Quit your whining, we can't lose. We got us an ace in the hole. Raise a toast to the universal soul. was in incarnated joy, afflicted with a kind of madness that made you hopeful and afraid, made you come in from the cold, rest a while in the universe's soul. Pointed it toward Vegas, but he broke down out in Bakersfield with the truckers and the beggars. Now he can't recall his name, his motivations or his goals. He signed on to the universe's soul.
After 6 days and nights of being on the ferry, we were ready to come ashore when we finally got to Homer. It felt like we'd really accomplished something just by getting there, but honestly, there was still quite a bit to do before we were able to get started on the job we had come to do. We needed to get our sample bottles, we needed to get groceries, we needed to arrange flights for the way home. All this stuff in the space of time that left us about 2 hours to sleep before our ride was going to come to pick us up in Augustine.
Well, we're finally here on Augustine Island.
There goes our ride.
Just listening to the last bit of motor sounds fade in the distance. And at that point, we are truly alone.
For better or worse.
The adventure begins, doesn't it?
Indeed. So we've only been on the island for about an hour, maybe an hour and a half, and I was looking for a nice flat piece of lumber to use for a table, and I came over here to pick up this, well, it looks like a 2x4, but it's not a 2x4, and I flipped it over, and sure enough, it's got Japanese mill stamp on it. Different number than the ones we found last year, but it's the same shape of stamp, and it's a heat-treated piece of wood, and it's got a serial number that we could write down and trace, which I think we will.
Last night was our first night on Augustine. Didn't go exactly as planned due to a falling tide and a blocked off lagoon. We ended up getting dropped on the north end of the island, and we were so pooped from getting 2 hours of sleep the night before, we just elected to set up camp here on the beach.
I was just saying, this trip has the potential, based on the weather that we're looking at right now, to be only partly a kayaking trip.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I'll be honest, there's a part of me that's looking around here going, holy shit, holy shit, holy shit. But then there's another part.
I have that too.
Yeah, there's another part of me that says the weather can't last like this the whole time. This is Alaska.
We're on our way to find some water. Really, that's the point. It seems like every day there's a critical thing to do. We're not at the point yet where water is critical and where we're overly worried about our water supply, but before we get to that point, we'd like to locate some fresh water, and that's not easy to do here on Augustine.
Well, as you can see, we found the water source. That's a big relief. Now we can concentrate on getting some work done, some science done, which was the whole reason that we're here.
This is gonna be boiled to top.
Well, I let Ken talk me into paddling around West Augustine, and I have to admit I was a little leery about it, but he was right. It's relatively benign over here, and we started our water sampling, so it does feel good to get the science programs on board. Okay, so it's north 59, 22.088, west 153, 33.139. Water temperature is 56 degrees. So I'll get our sample, and wind is calm.
So, I love what you've done with the place.
Yeah. It's called
The feng shui here is awesome.
yeah. Ooh. You know, it was so funny when we walked up the hill and we turned the corner. My first thought was, oh boy, this is looking a bit rustic, but that didn't last very long. I was soon very grateful to be out of it. Just the thought of being confined in your tent in that particular storm, that would have been brutal. And we'd be exhausted. We wouldn't have gotten any rest.
There were times last night where I could feel the wind on this wall right here, and it was kind of like being on the ferry. It was kind of like that emotion, and I kind of at one point thought, going back and forth my bed here, thinking, wow, it's kind of like being on the water.
Yeah.
And so you imagine that in your tent. It wouldn't feel like you're on the water necessarily, but it would feel like you're in hell.
Yeah, like you were getting beat with a broom.
Yeah, so it's definitely it's a welcome spot. I'm glad we're here.
Well, we've got a lot of different challenges out here, but one of them is just keeping all the tech going, which is, constantly taking advantage of any opportunity we have to get the solar chargers out and get the batteries charged up.
It's a pretty demanding environment that we're operating in, and part of that is repairing your equipment. I'm guessing that I shredded this bottom of my dry suit, my booty, on a barnacle yesterday, so today's the day to do the fix.
So the only disadvantage of staying at the cabin and in the lagoon is that anytime we want to break out, we have to do a portage through a rock field which extends on either end, both the north and south side of the lagoon. And I mean, it looks like somebody said, oh, let's close off the harbor and sprinkle a line of boulders. So that's a bit troublesome, but I don't know, I guess it's the price or the package you pay for paddling in Alaska. Either way, it's got to be done.
we are at the south end of the second lagoon, and this will be our first debris survey, and I think it'll be our third water sample.
There's definitely more here than initially meets the eye. There's quite a bit of debris up in the weeds, so we can go ahead and do a survey, see how that turns out. See, a lot of it's from the fishing industry. We've got rope, we've got long line clips, we've got buoys here. Another thing that you're going to find a lot of on these beaches, not just here on Augustine, but anywhere you go looking, are single-use plastic bottles, whether they're water bottles like this one from Asia, or a 7-Up bottle from here in the United States. These plastic single-use bottles are literally everywhere.
The one-time use type bottles are environmental disaster. And a lot of people, there are reasons to use one-time use items, and I can think of a lot of issues where you would want to have one-time use items. For example, the medical industry. When you want things sterile, you want them sterile, and you don't want them reused. You have disposable needles, you have disposable bottles in the healthcare industry, and that makes sense. That's a good place. But in your home, why?
Why? That's a great question. Consider these simple facts. Here in the US alone, we use 60 million single-use water bottles daily. And of that, 85% never make it to the recycling bin. That leaves 1,500 bottles that end up in our landfills and here on our oceans every second.
So we're just looking for a place to camp and get out of the wind. We've paddled for 4 hours, and as per expected, the winds have come up and forced us off the water. So now it's just a matter of finding a place to camp.
You never know what you're going to find when you walk on the beach. On March 11th, 2011, the Japanese tsunami hit, wiping out about 400 miles of Japanese coastline. A lot of that debris was washed out to sea, and a lot of that debris is hitting the west coast of the United States, including here in Alaska. We're at the top of the North Pacific gyre here, so stuff that spins out of that gyre may have come from the tsunami. It's often difficult to tell what came from the tsunami because some of it's fishing gear, which could have come off a boat, some of it's other kind of construction material, which may or may not have been related to the tsunami. But one thing we know for sure, when we find one of these red kerosene containers, we know that it's actual tsunami debris from the 2011 Sendai tsunami. And the reason we know that is because it doesn't have any other application other than residential. A lot of the homes that were hit by the tsunami used kerosene to heat their homes. These are the containers that they used. July 4th, and it's kind of hard not to think about the people that you love and the people that you're missing. And when you think about how impossibly far away I am, but I just hope everybody's having a great day. And as happy as I am to be on Augustine, and as happy as I am to be doing this work that we're doing, I sure miss you guys.
Well, tomorrow begins our escape off the island, and I say escape because of the fact that the weather here has really been heavy and for me, it's been concerning. We've had some wind that was just on the verge of being unpaddable. And if that's an offshore wind, that's blowing you out to sea. And if that's an onshore wind in the wrong place, that's piling your boat up into the rocks. And that's pretty much it. So
I don't think we want to cross this and then cross that.
no.
I have a feeling that's not going to be a good idea.
My opinion is we cross here and we get in here and we start checking things out.
Okay. We're about ready to do our loadout, leaving the lagoon here on Augustine. We're gonna go over to West Augustine, spend the night, get an early start in the morning, hopefully cheat the wind. And today has been just a great day. I mean, this is about as windy as it's gotten all day. We're hoping for a lot more of the same after the week we just had. We're loading the boats. This is our first load of all the stuff that we have to take with us. A lot of it we weren't planning on taking with us. A lot of it was planned to be flown off the island at this point, and we were just going to take what we needed for the journey back up to Chiswick Island. Plans changed, and our shuttle didn't quite work out the way we planned it to do. So we're going to go ahead and take as much as we can. We've already left some pretty good stuff in the cabin that I'm kind of sad that we're leaving, but we don't have room for it. And hopefully we have room for everything we brought down the hill, and we're about to try loading in the boats.
Well, a little slight change of plans. We were going over to West Augustine and the weather had been just calm all day. We knew there was a forecast for 20-knot winds showing up the next afternoon. We made a calculated decision. We came over here. Seems to be the right decision. You can see Augustine over my shoulder. I'm glad to see it in the rearview mirror. We're in a beautiful spot. We are dealing with bears, but I am glad to be on this side. But we've got our bear spray and we got bear wire, but I'm relieved.
Destination for the end of the trip, or at least the end of the paddling segment of the trip, was the Snug Harbor Cannery on Chiswick Island. It's about 100 miles up Cook Inlet from where we came ashore from Augustine. It was nice to get over to that side of Cook Inlet, nice to get on the north side where the weather was better, water was plentiful, and it seems like the miles got easier the further along we got.
Well, the river's flooding, the sky is slate gray. Tomorrow's already possessed by today. On an endless horizon, the mind turns on itself. On your grand
There was a lot going on with this trip, and in addition to collecting data for our science programs, my primary responsibility was trying to capture footage for a film, and that sometimes proved challenging.
I gotta say that I'm just glad that we've got all those critical crossings behind us, and it feels good to relax and actually enjoy the scenery and to be dry. This has been one tough trip, much tougher than last year's project. Well, first of all, congratulations. It was a good trip. And we made it. We're here at the canyon.
Just got off the water. Glad to be here. Ready to get out of this dry suit, which I love, by the way. So I'm ready to get out of it.
Yeah, I'm ready to take a shower.
I'm ready for you to take a shower, too.
1, 2, 3.
Oh yeah, I almost forgot to mention that our tide wire has lost tension. And I finally remembered this song.
Well, this looks great. We haven't suffered with our freeze dried. That's been delicious.
It has.
But eggs, I'm looking forward to.
Strapping on the feed bag here.
It's I think probably the lack of birds. The lack of birds to do necropsies on. We saw an awful lot of live birds, but we didn't find any beach cast birds.
I know, and when you consider all the times I've come across birds on the beach, it's a bit curious. I wonder if it's not, the bears.
I think it's a combination. I think it's the bears. I think it's the gulls. I think it's the extreme tides.
That's true too.
I think there's a lot of reasons why there might not be, but for whatever reason, it just was not to be.
Well, we got the other science was good. So
I'm happy with the sampling we were able to do.
Well, Abby, thanks for joining me today. And I'm really excited to hear about the results of the water samples we sent you.
Your samples were quite unique in terms of our other adventure and scientists for conservation water samples and the sheer plastic quantity and the types of plastic that we were finding in your samples.
I think about some of the kayaking that we've done in the past and the kayaking trips and the expeditions and the places we've gone. And I look back at those trips now and I wouldn't do them again, in the sense that I feel like I want to kayak for something more than just a simple trip. Mm-hmm. And it makes the trip better to do the science.
Oh, it certainly does. I think, for me, I've always enjoyed the outdoors, but there's a real sense of satisfaction when you, not only is the science part of it interesting, but you feel like you're contributing. So it adds another layer to it.
Right.
And, it's becoming, there's more data that needs to be collected than you think can be correlated. So as citizen scientists, those of us with the skills to get out to the areas that other people might not go, I kind of feel that there's a little bit of a responsibility to do something, kind of a pay it forward, if you will.
Right. What were your thoughts about the surveys that we did do?
Well, I guess a couple things jumped out at me right off. One, I noticed that certain beaches seem to predispose for processed lumber.
Yeah, true too. Yeah.
And then other beaches seem predisposed for styrofoam. And I don't know if that was because on that particular beach it was cobbly, and so we couldn't see down in there.
Yeah.
I have to admit I'm a little pleased that we did find beaches that were relatively clean, which
we didn't last year.
Yeah, we didn't, and so that's a little encouraging. It's surprising, but it is encouraging. I think hopefully that sends out the message that it's not too late.
Yeah.
That we, as a society, we can turn the tide, if you'll forgive the pun, and come up with solutions to this crisis that we're developing in the ocean.